Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to wait another little bit just as people come in, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started now. All right, so first off, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. This is a presentation for rookie teams, FTC Rookies 101 and getting started. So targeting really the coaches and somewhat the students as to how to start your year, what this year might look like for you. A little bit about myself. My name is Mikkel Lovell. I have been a FTC coach for the past 10 years. I work up at Lakeview Academy up in Gainesville, Georgia. We have three teams, teams 5898, 18443, and 26248. I'm also one of the coordinators for the Northeast Georgia League, the Lakeview East Jackson League, and I'm also a member of the Georgia FTC Planning Committee. My email address is on the screen, so if you need to reach out or ask questions, feel free to. I've also got a QR code on the screen as well as a link to this presentation. So I've tried to put the link almost on every slide, so if you want to kind of go along with me as you want, you feel free to do that. And then also, I believe the presentation and recording will be available after the fact. All right, so let's get started. An overview of what I'm going to cover. I want to talk about how to get registered. I assume probably the ones watching right now are probably already registered, but for future teams, what are the steps to getting registered, both nationally and locally? How might you pay for the season? Different things you might want to do or consider. Maybe what parts to purchase. What's out there? What do you need to look at? And then finally, what does the season look like? How do you manage your team? What does a meet look like? What is all of this really about? And then at the very end, I'll have a little time segment for Q&A for any questions you may have. So let's get started and talk about getting registered. So there are two parts to getting registered. The first main part is first registration. So this is really the national or global registration that you need to do with your team. And there are kind of two fees that we're looking at. First one is $325 plus all the parts that you might need to get, and the second one for the local registration is $350. So let's talk about the first registration first. So you'll need to create an account on the First Inspire's website, and then once you get into that account and go to the first dashboard, you can actually go through the process of creating a team. And actually, before I continue anymore, there's a great walkthrough that a team called The Pinions has put together and put on their YouTube channel. So I linked to that at the top right-hand corner. You can watch through that. Really good at what stage did they do this, and after this did they buy this or buy that. So they do a great job of walking you through the entire registration process. I will say that one is only for the first registration. They are a Georgia team, but we'll cover that in a little bit. So on the first dashboard, a requirement that you as a team have to have is 2 lead coaches, and both have to pass YPP, or the Youth Protection Program. So that's a background screening process, so you both need to have that completed and checked off before you can do anything else. You also need to sign consent and release forms, coaches and students. We'll talk about students in a little bit. And then you need to pay your $325 registration fee. I will say you will want to hold off on this if you are applying for grants through FIRST. Okay? Now, if any of those things aren't met, you will have a list of outstanding tasks, as you can see at the bottom, of what you need to complete. Okay? So let's talk about those grants and why we might want to hold off on paying the registration fee. Okay, so on the FIRST website, there's a list of grants available for both rookie and veteran teams, and these grants, if you receive them, they are put into your FIRST account, kind of like a balance that you can carry through the season. They're only usable through this season, and they're not gonna like cut you a check at the end for whatever's left over. So you have to use it through the FTC storefront. So it's important that if you're gonna get or apply for one of these grants, that you use that money for registration. So that's really the reason why we would hold off on paying the registration fees outright, is that if you're waiting on one of these, make sure you hear back before going along. Okay? There's lots of good grants available. Right at the top, that First Tech Challenge Hardship Grant, you can reach out to the Robert May in Georgia, and he can kind of evaluate your situation, see what your team might be able to get. There's also FTC Sim Grant, I believe, for rookie teams, as well as other grants available. So definitely take a look at that. How do you pay for registration? So once you're in that FIRST dashboard, under your team options, there's a little drop down for payment and product, and you'll click order products, and that will actually bring you to what's called the FTC storefront. Linked at the bottom of this slide, there is kind of a description of all of the options and the pricing that FIRST has put together, so you can look through that. We'll actually talk about up next what you might want to purchase in this step. But the FTC storefront kind of walks you through the different kind of needed things that you would need as a team for the season. So, what might you want to purchase? I'll say up front, this is my recommendation. This is not stating anything from Georgia First or whatever from FIRST itself. Purely my recommendations. For a true rookie team, definitely get the driver kit. So that includes your game pads and your driver hub, as well as a webcam. But the game pads and driver hub are what you're going to need to actually move your robot around. In addition, the electronics kit, which is the control hub, as well as a few sensors and wires and power switch and that kind of thing, you're definitely going to need that. What I don't recommend for a true rookie team is the Rev starter kit. We'll talk about in a little bit why I might suggest something else, but really the Rev starter kit, Rev is a great company, Rev has a lot of great parts, but I found that the Rev product, kit line is a little bit more intermediate / advanced for like true rookie teams. So might hold off on buying that and using the funds for something else, like the field kit. So if you have some extra grant funds available, you can use that to purchase the actual game with elements. I will say the driver kit, the electronics kit, and the Rev starter kit are all sold at a slight discount through the FTC storefront, whereas the game set is not. So really, it just is up to you. If you have some extra funds from a grant lying around, you can use that to apply towards a game field. And that's just the field and the elements. All right, so let's kind of hop back to and finish the getting registered part. So again, hold off on the registration fee until you finish getting grants, and then go through that entire purchase process. And that all three of those steps are really what makes you official in the system. So you 2 lead coaches, sign your forms, and then pay your fee. The last step is team member enrollment. So while that's required as far as the season goes, it's not really required as far as registration. You're not, hindered from going on if you don't have your students enrolled. But you'll need students enrolled later in the season. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so let's talk about part 2, getting registered locally. So in Georgia, we have leagues, so they're kind of region-based groupings of teams. And so you'll need to actually go on to the site that is linked at the top, teameventreg.org, and log in through there. And again, you have to have had 2 lead coaches pass YPP in the first dashboard before you can register for a league at the state level. Okay? You'll need to choose a league to register, and you can click on the link at the bottom to see more information about the leagues. Typically, what I recommend is you want to try and find a league that's close by. If you have a few options available to you, you can look at the schedule and see maybe, we can make these events, but we might miss a meet or two with this one, so we might prioritize going to that one. As far as your registration fee, your $350 your league fee covers all of your league events, so that's all of your regular competitions, or what are called meets, and then the end of the season league tournament, or really your region tournament. So your $350 covers all of that. Again, that is separate from the $325 that you're paying to First Global, right? So you got a $325 to First, and then a $350 to Georgia First. All right, so let's look at leagues. You can probably not read any of that on the screen, but we have, I believe, 8 different leagues all across the state. Some can hold 16 teams, some can hold up to 32. So just look at what's in your area and what's available. I've put a QR code and a direct link to this document so that you can see the specific links. But basically, again, you want to see what's nearby and what works schedule-wise for you and your team. All right, so how do we pay for the season? How might you pay for the season? So we already talked about the grants that are on the first page, but there are also some extra grants available, as well as some local grants that you might want to know about. So we currently have the Google grant in Georgia First Tech Challenge. It's a great grant. It provides a lot of cash for your team, and it's written directly to you and your group. There are requirements though, so half or more of your team need to be middle school students, and then you also need to have some students that are traditionally underrepresented, either low income or Title I or rural or just general underrepresented students in STEM, right? So there's a whole application process, but you can get a good amount of funds towards your team for your season, and then in addition, if you end up advancing to state, you'll get another set of funds to cover that cost. So really great grant. There's also some professional development included in that, so definitely look into that if that applies to you and your team. Apart from that, there's also some good sponsorships and grants. We've had success with the Gene Haas Foundation, so you can look into that. PTC, which is a software company that does CAD software, they have grants available for FTC. If you have a mentor that is affiliated with the Department of Defense, there's some DoD STEM grants. I believe the Intuitive Foundation is actually a veteran team only grant, but double check that. It might be useful for you, or at least you could apply for it the next year. We've also had some good luck with local utility providers, from Georgia Power to your Georgia Natural Gas, or right. There's a lot of different utility providers that can provide a little bit of help, so definitely look into that. And then I will say that most of those, if not all of the ones on the page, other than the Google grant, require that you be a 501c3 organization. So what does that mean? if you're already affiliated with a school, you're taken care of. That's the easy part. If you're not, if you're a community-based team, then you might want to look into the Georgia Robotics Alliance. So there was another session other in the symposium, but basically they are kind of a 501c3 organization that helps a lot of different robotics teams and organizations get that 501c3 status and get you some grant funds. So yeah, look into them. Some other things that you might want to look into. Sponsorships are always a great option. So you might look to local businesses or some donations from family and friends. You could even do a spirit night at some local restaurants. FIRST has actually put together a great fundraising toolkit on their website. Goes through a lot of different options and a lot of different things that you could look into. You could always do just the traditional bake sales or car washes. If you are affiliated with a school, a public school, you can go into Donors Choose and create a project for your first team there. Usually once a year or so, once, twice a year, maybe once every other year. There's usually a large company that partners with FIRST and says, hey, any FIRST projects on Donors Choose will fully fund. So again, if you're affiliated with a public school, get on there, create a project for your team, and hopefully something comes up soon. All right, so we talked about getting registered. We talked about how to pay for your season. Now let's talk about what to purchase for your season. I told you, my recommendations on the FTC storefront. So instead of buying the Rev starter kit, the starter kit that I would suggest purchasing is the starter kit from GoBuilda. You'll see a lot of teams out there that use GoBuilda. It's a very modular, easy to use system. They make great quality parts, and their support is amazing, right? Just make sure that you go onto the website and sign up for the team discount. So you can see on the picture that the price for that starter kit goes from $850 down to $640. Makes a big difference. So make sure to sign up for that discount. Other parts that you might want to look into, the expansion hub from Rev Robotics. So if you think you might need more than 4 motors on your robot, which is a decent likelihood, you want to get an expansion hub. Again, make sure to sign up on their website for a discount code. A lot of their products will have a discount. Just make sure you go to the discount category and do that. But it's a discount code good for the year, and then you'll need to sign up again the following year. All right, some other recommended parts. The number one thing that I feel like affects a lot of rookie teams is static discharge. So one part that helps prevent that is a grounding strap. A lot of different companies have it. Rev has a grounding strap. I believe Andy Mark has a grounding strap. Swift Robotics, which is kind of a new player in the game, they will actually, I believe, still give you a free grounding strap. So look into that. Whatever kit that you do end up going with, make sure you get an extra battery or two. Having the ability to swap out batteries after a match is really useful. One thing for your driver hub that you want to look into is a USB-C PD charger, which is really just a fast charger. The cable that comes with the driver hub, you can connect that to your computer or anything to charge, but unless you have a fast charge block, it's just going to be kind of a slow charge. So make sure you get a PD charger or power delivery charger. I've linked to just like an Amazon search. One of those is going to do you some good. Another tool that we like to use in our program is the servo programmer. We have a GoBuilda one and a Rev servo programmer, but there's also one from Studica. But it allows you to program in kind of the angles of a servo. So super useful. Another thing to get is just some extra tools. So whatever starter kit that you do use or that you do purchase, it'll usually come with one set of tools, and just having another set or 2 or 3 so that multiple students can be working on something at the same time. That's going to be a game changer. And then finally, definitely not least, safety glasses. At every event that you and your students go to, you're going to be required to wear safety glasses. Go ahead and get a set, get some backups, and get your students used to wearing safety glasses. Make them wear them anytime they're working on the robot, anytime they're in the room, put on your safety glasses, because once you get to the meets, it's going to be every time. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. All right, for your field, sometimes you have a decent amount of area to set up a field. Sometimes you don't. The first page actually has a DIY setup for a perimeter, so you can click on that link. They also have DIY resources for other things on their game page, so you can click the other link for that. But if you want a game set with elements and everything, AndyMark is the only retailer for that. So you got to go to AndyMark to get your full game set, or you can get a partial game set, either a red side or a blue side. If you want to get extra fancy and go fully legit, you can get a perimeter with tape and tiles and even bags from AndyMark as well. They are the official supplier for First Hit Challenge, so make sure to get it from them. And then here's just a page for popular vendors. So again, GoBuilda, our program loves them. You'll see a lot of teams use GoBuilda. Rover Robotics is also a very good company. AndyMark, one company that's kind of seems like they're bowing out of FTC is Tetrix. A newcomer is Swift Robotics, and then Studica is also becoming a big player in FTC robotics as well. If you noticed, I don't know if you've watched the game reveal yet or not, but there are 4 starter bots that were in the video. GoBuilda, Rev, AndyMark, and Studica all had starter bots that put together. So you can go there to each of those sites and not only purchase their starter kit, but see what ideas they came up with. All right, so that was what to purchase, at least my recommendations on what to purchase. Now let's talk about team management. What does your team need to do during the season? So let's talk about the season timeline. So right now, September, we just got finished with kickoff. The first meet isn't until November, so you have a month and a half-ish to start building and practicing. All of the meets will typically be between November and January. Some finish in December, so just be aware of that. All of the leagues will end with a league tournament or a region tournament. That's typically either in December or January. And then once you advance past that, or if you advance past that, you would then go to the Georgia State Championship, which is in the middle of February. For those that advance past the state championship, the first championship will be in late April/early May. So one awesome document that FIRST has put together is called the Coach Tracker document. I've linked to it on that slide. But basically it's like, week 1, what do we need to focus on? Week 2, what do we need to focus on? So it's a great document that you should look into. Kind of guides you through, what pace you should be setting for your team and what to look out for at what point in the season. So coming back to registration a little bit, you need to get your students registered, and I've linked to the overview that FIRST has put together, and I highly, highly, highly recommend using Express Enrollment. And what that does is it creates a link and it creates a QR code that you can send directly to the parents of your students, and they can just super simply get logged in and add their student to your team. Alternatively, there's kind of a more manual way of doing it where you invite the parents and then you got to make sure that they sign the consent and release and all that kind of thing. So definitely look into Express Enrollment. It kind of walks them through every step of the way, and then they don't have to type in a team number or anything. It's directly typed to your team. So definitely look into that. And it's important that you get all of your students registered, because at every meet you will need to bring a paper roster that shows your list of students and that they have a release form signed on the first dashboard. Next up is task or project management. So just to kind of keep your team on schedule, on pace, or just to discuss what needs to be done, you might want to look into a project management website or software. We've used with our program Trello and GitHub projects. We've tinkered with Monday.com. All of these are very similar. You can create a card, a little task card, and assign it to someone. Tried and true is a whiteboard with sticky notes. It's always worked. So just something to keep everyone on the same pages. Team 1 is doing this, Team 2 is doing this, or this person is assigned this task. Another thing that some of you may be familiar with or may want to look into is what's called Agile or Scrum. It's just a methodology of task management. And what they do, or within that process, they have short sprints of like 1 to 2 weeks of our goal is this for this sprint. And we're going to make the most minimum viable product to satisfy that, and then we'll reflect on it at the end and then build on from there. So I've linked to a YouTube video, or I guess a YouTube series maybe, that a team did of their sprints from last year, kind of seeing it in action a little bit, at least their reflection stage, where they kind of show their robot, what their goals were, and then how it performed. So something to look into. Another important step for the entire season is documentation. So that's important because when it gets time for the league tournament or state championship, your team is going to be turning in a portfolio of their entire progress for the season. So one thing that you can always rely on is if you have that task management software, you can go back and read through that. You might just want to have like a shared Google Doc or a shared Word doc that everyone just submits to and works on together. We found that having a photo album, a shared photo album, is useful. So we use Google Photos so everyone can snap pictures along the way and submit to that. We've also set up a form of just a standard like, what did you do today? What went wrong? What went well? What do you still need to work on? And put a QR code just in the room so that maybe in the middle of a task they want to document it, or when they're finishing up at the end of the day or the end of the practice, they can scan it and quickly submit it. When it comes time for the portfolio submission, we like to take the content that we've written in either the form or the Google Doc or anything like that and transfer it over to Canva. Canva we find makes it look very more professional, nicer looking. So that's a useful tool to transition to. Not that you have to do it in Canva, but it kind of ups the look of it a bit. My recommendation though is to start early on your documentation. If you haven't started yet, go ahead and start. Start even just a plain Word document. Everyone needs to contribute, though it is nice to have a lead person to kind of organize everyone together, but everyone should contribute to what they did and reflect on what went well and what didn't. I also recommend having your portfolio ready about 2 weeks before it needs to be. So, 2 weeks out from your league tournament, it needs to be roughly finished, right? That gives you some time to make some quick changes, maybe do some revision or proofreading, and then have a nice print version about 1 week ahead, right? Because you'll need to submit a digital copy and bring a printed version. So definitely do that. All right, another team management thing is programming. I'm not going to talk a lot about programming, but there are 3 different options available for you. If your team is really, really rookie, there's block-based. There's also kind of an intermediate, which is on-bot Java. And then there's more advanced, which is Android Studio, where they're typing by hand and submitting to the robot or pushing to the robot. If you do Android Studio, definitely look into version control through GitHub or something similar, and make sure get everyone on your team, whoever's coding, on the same Android Studio version. please, please, please make sure no one throughout the season makes any updates to their version of Android or their version of Gradle or whatever within the project. There's been lots of times throughout the seasons that it's like, oh, a pop up saying your Gradle plugin needs to be updated. Don't push it. It's going to break everything. Okay, just keep everyone the same. There you go. As far as learning to code with FTC, there's two great websites. One is FTC Sim. They actually have a grant available for rookies that complete their little tutorial section, so you can look into that. And then Virtual Robot Simulator is also a similar kind of website. You can have a virtual robot and program it and see it move around on the field. Last but not least, as far as software goes, is CAD software. Again, if you have true beginners, you might want to look into Tinkercad, but there's not a whole lot of FTC support with that. The one that I tend to recommend to rookie teams is the first one under intermediate, which is Onshape. So not only is it pretty easy to work with, it's all web-based. So if your students or school only has Chromebooks, it still works, right? It also has, you can get access to an FTC parts repository, so you can just pull in parts from Rev or pull in parts from AndyMark, and super easy to use. There's lots of other options as far as the intermediate category. Fusion 360 is really good. Dassault Systems has their 3D experience, and then there's also FreeCAD. As far as the advanced level, if you really have some advanced students, you can also look into SolidWorks or Inventor or PTC Creo. All right, a lot of stuff. So what does the season itself look like? That was how you manage your team throughout the season, but what does the season itself look like? So we already talked about kind of the calendar of the season. It's been kickoff, now we have a few weeks to build, and then it goes into meets. What's a meet? What does a meet look like? So I pulled a sample schedule from last year's meet, or one of last year's meets. So typically you will arrive pretty early in the morning. You'll check in with a printed roster, make sure you have your students registered, and then your team will go through inspection with their robots. We'll cover inspection in more detail next slide. After inspection, we'll have opening ceremonies, and then you'll start your matches, and then you'll be done for the day. League meets are pretty short and sweet usually. Every team gets 5 to 6 matches that they'll play. Sometimes you may have a double meet, which means you'll have inspection and meet 1 matches, and then a break for lunch, and then meet 2 matches, another set of 5 to 6 matches in the afternoon. Just takes care of 2 sets of meets on 1. If you haven't yet watched some example matches on YouTube, hit that link. There's a search just for FTC matches. It'll be good for you and your students to look through what does a match really look like, as well as watch this year's game video. So, what is inspection? There are 2 types of inspections that your team will have to go through. The first being robot or hardware inspection. That's what really is happening in this picture. So that's to check that your robot fits in the correct size and that they have the team number and the correct labels and it's made out of the correct materials, all of that. What does the hardware look like? Is it the correct thing? And then the second part of inspection is the field inspection, or really the software inspection. Does the technology run correctly? Does it connect? Can you stop it in the event of an emergency? Does the robot, as it's running, damage the field, right? All the things that need to be checked that make sure it's running properly. One thing I always tell my kids to do, even if it's right before Meet 4 or the league tournament, is there is a pre-check, a self-checklist of the inspection. Print it out, go through it ahead of every meet, because sometimes they will have removed a part or added a part and now it's just slightly out of size, or they removed the part that had the power label on it. So going through that pre-checklist before every meet, super handy, very, very important. One last note is that during inspection, the only people that need to be with the robot is the drive team. So if you have a team of 10, don't send the whole team. just send the people that drive the robot. Okay, that'll make it faster. All right, so let's talk about what's the difference between a league meet versus a league tournament. So a league meet is just inspection and matches, right? It's smaller scale. It's typically, just the teams from your specific league. Um, the league tournament, though, is a region tournament, right? Typically, you will combine multiple leagues together. So if you have a league of 16 over here and a league of 16 over here, they'll join together for their league tournament. And in addition to just inspection and matches, you'll also have judging, which we'll talk about in a second, as well as awards at the end of the day. And then there's also, in addition to your regular matches, there'll be a set of playoff matches. So a little bit more high stakes, definitely ranking involved and that kind of thing. And it's also where your team can advance to the next level, to state championship. And again, if your team advances to state, there's an additional state tournament fee of $450. All right, so let's talk about judging. What is judging? I've linked to a web page on what the judging process is and what that kind of entails. Just kind of a quick and dirty summary of it. It's a student-only presentation. There can be one adult in the room, but they have to be silent. So only students get to present. They have 5 minutes to present, and they have 5 minutes of Q&A at the end. And it's what directly determines kind of the start of award placement. So it's super important that they talk about what went well for them this season and what they're really proud of. In addition to the presentation, they'll need to hand over an engineering portfolio. So that's up to 15 pages plus a cover page, and it documents your entire season. I also linked to a page that kind of describes that. If you want to look into some example portfolios, hit the link at the top right, and that has a repository of a lot of different portfolios and what awards that those teams won and that kind of thing. So kind of a good overview of what you might want your portfolio to look like. The last piece of judging would be pit judging, right? So depending on what your students talked about or how they did in their presentation, judges will kind of split up from there and say, okay, we want to go talk to team XYZ to learn more about their outreach or learn more about their robot. So if your team is getting talked to in the pits by judges, it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You want it to happen. All right, judging tips. 1, start documenting now. Get a doc going, get a form, even if it's handwritten, get documenting. You want pictures of your drawings, your sketches, anything on the whiteboard, anything along the way, CAD, anything of your outreach, document everything. Definitely reflect on your failures, like what went wrong, why do you think it went wrong, and what are you going to do different because of it. Include any calculations, so any launching speed or torque calculations or even measurements, right? Include those in your documentation. I can't stress this enough, but have your students practice their presentation. Practice, practice, practice. From personal experience, I can tell you the teams of the past few years, the teams that practiced only once or maybe that morning versus the teams that practice 3, 4, 5 times, completely different performance level, right? Those teams that practiced felt more comfortable in the room, they did better in the presentation. Last but not least, print multiple copies of your portfolio. You'll leave one with the judges, but it's also nice to have one back at your pit table, and then also just one as a backup, just in case, right? And then last but not least, awards and advancement. I'm not going to go super in depth into all of these. Definitely read the competition manual. If you didn't get a chance to go to the judging and portfolio webinar earlier, definitely look into that, see if you can get a hold of that recording. But basically, we have 3 robot awards: design, control, and innovate. They kind of each deal with a separate section or little flavor of the robot. Then we have outreach awards, so teams that get more teams involved in FIRST or have a plan to sustain their team or connect with STEM professionals, right? That kind of thing. There's one that's really more portfolio slash engineering based. That's the Think Award. And then the end all be all award is Inspire. That's the one that everyone tries to get. So look into all of those. Find the award that you think your team is going to do well at, and really push your team to do that. Last but not least, advancement points. It's a new thing for all the teams. So I've linked to the community blog that they talked about what they were doing, why they were doing it. Kind of goes super in depth. So look into that, read the competition manual. But basically, you get points for either winning matches or getting into playoffs or doing some things during the match, as well as winning awards. So all of those points come together and rank you. And then again, top teams advance to the next level based on those advancement points. And again, the state tournament, extra $450 registration fee. All right, that is everything. I ended with just kind of a resource page for teams. If you haven't heard of Game Manual Zero, it's a great resource. I've linked to it right at the top. It goes through anything and everything. It's kind of like a Wikipedia page, but just for FTC. Definitely look into that. Lots of other resources on there, links to all the different vendors, lots of cool stuff. So, now, what questions do you guys have? Either raise your hand or you can chat in the webinar chat and then we'll answer it. And again, if you just want to reach out to me, I put my email on the screen and you can reach out whenever is convenient for you. There we go. Just covered a lot of information. Yes, I tried to. Can you place for the link for the portfolios? Yes, I will go back and do that. Let's see. Can I? I'll put that into the chat. Or not, maybe. Paste. There we go. That's why. There you go. Any other questions? Well, if that is it, I hope that sheds some light on the season for all of you rookie teams. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to, answer and reach out and help as any way I can. Other than that, have a great rest of your afternoon.